Hey everybody, I hope you all are doing well. Sorry about the delay today. We had a 2:30 start instead of 2 p.m., but welcome to my Facebook Live. So it's been a few weeks since I've been on. I unexpectedly had to cancel a couple weeks of Facebook Lives due to a family emergency. Actually, I had to go rush out to New Jersey because my dad had a near heart attack. And turned out he was, for all intents and purposes, other than a little bit of blood pressure and cholesterol, he's been really healthy and super active. He's 83 years old, but super, super active. But when he was flying back to New Jersey from Los Angeles, he had symptoms, and heart attack was avoided, but we found out that he had some pretty significant blockage of his blood vessels in his heart. So he ended up having to have an open heart surgery, triple bypass. And it was scary, but he's stable, he's doing well, and I'm happy to report that he has a new lease on life. But this really made me very aware of the fact that we can have poor health and not even recognize it. And one of the main factors that I think contributes to that is our nutrition. And this plays a factor not only for our heart and our cardiovascular health, but it actually plays a factor for our pain as well. And you've heard me talk previously about how the type of foods that we eat can actually influence our pain. Well, that is actually very, very true. And the reality is that, unfortunately, the winter season is actually a time where a lot of people have their pain relapse. You can have some level of control, but then over the winter months, it gets a little bit chillier. Even here in LA, it's been pretty darn frigid lately. Not as cold as it was in New Jersey when I was back there, but regardless, it makes us not want to be as physically active, not as active outdoors, and then ultimately we end up going towards comfort foods, especially during the holidays. So the purpose of today's talk is to really go over what are some, tips, what are some strategies that we can use to make sure that our nutrition stays sound over the holidays. To make sure that we don't, gain a little ridiculous amount of weight, or make sure that we don't have any cardiovascular issues or whatnot, but also to make sure that we don't feed the fire of our pain. So, to kind of recap what some of the things that I've said in the past, why does nutrition play a factor in pain? Well, we're starting to recognize more and more that certain foods cause inflammation to be better or worse. So certain foods can actually cause inflammation throughout our body. And if we have pain conditions that are related to inflammation of various joints or body parts, nerves, etc., then when we add foods into our diet that can actually increase inflammation, we are quite literally adding fuel to the fire. So unfortunately, some of those foods that cause inflammation are actually very, very common during the holidays, because these kind of fall into that category of comfort foods. So what we're going to talk about today are basically things to do and things not to do. So do and don't, right? And we're just going to outline some of the things that we want to really pay attention to as we go and we get together with loved ones and we're enjoying ourselves. There's things that we can really pay attention to. So as far as the don'ts are concerned, one of the major things as far as your pain is concerned that we want to be careful about are processed sugars. So sugars in general, carbohydrates in general, but particularly simple carbohydrates, so things like your white breads, your white rices, your pastas, but especially the carbs that are associated with processed sugars. So this gets a little bit dicey, right? Because we like some sweets. We like some things like desserts and pies and all that fun stuff. Your waffle breakfasts and your donuts and all of that fun stuff is really comforting over the holidays. But we just want to be careful and about going overboard. We really want to be careful about sugar in moderation. Another sugar that we don't actually think about too much is actually alcohol. So alcohol is something that is, for all intents and purposes, sugar, and that is something that if we are binging in alcohol over the holidays while we're partying, etc., is something that definitely can cause issues. So, we got to think about what we're drinking, right? So we got to kind of drink towards your body and towards your health. You want to drink mindfully. So, what are the choices that we can make, right? Things like eggnog, for example, that may or may not have alcohol in it. We've had these discussions before with patients recently. So if you're watching right now, you know what I'm talking about. But eggnog, for example, is a super high calorie drink, and although it might be a traditional thing that some people drink, it might not be the best choice as far as our pain is concerned. But if you're thinking about having some alcoholic drinks, there are a few options that we can consider. So, for example, wine. Instead of going down the route of white wine, going down the route of red wine. Red wine in moderation, if you're having a glass or two of red wine, that's actually not the end of the world, because red wine, although there is sugar associated with that, red wine also has an ingredient called resveratrol, which actually has some anti-inflammatory benefits. So that might be something to consider. And then as far as alcohols are concerned, drinking an alcoholic beverage could be perfectly reasonable, but pacing yourself with a water or a seltzer or something along those lines in between drinks could actually be really helpful. Beer, unfortunately, is a high carb and potentially high calorie alcoholic beverage. And again, if we're going down the route of beer, pacing with beer and water could actually save ourselves from, number one, getting too sloshed, but number two, also having too much of an inflammatory reaction. On the fluids note, another strategy that's also oftentimes used is just plain old simple water. So water, high quality H2O, is probably one of the most important things to consider during your holidays, because we find ourselves eating a lot, but we sometimes don't find ourselves hydrating enough. And even having an 8-ounce glass of water before starting any meal could help with decreasing our hunger by filling up our stomach and then preventing us from overindulging. So water is going to be something that's super important as kind of a part of your strategy overall. On the liquid note, I promise I'm going to get to foods in a second, but on the liquid note and going back to alcohol, try not to drink too much on an empty stomach, right? So having some sort of food in your system before drinking can actually make a big factor. Now for some strategies in regards to food. So if you're going and you're going to your family's house or friend's house and sharing time with loved ones, you may be at a place, at a location where there's a table with snackage that's all over the place. This is an interesting little tidbit that I think can be really beneficial to prevent overeating, is distance. It sounds crazy, but making sure that you're not hanging out at the snack table can actually play a really big factor. Because if you're hanging out with friends, hanging out with family, talking, conversing, reconnecting, having some fun, if you're doing that at the snack table, you're going to be more likely to actually just be grubbing away. And typically, snack foods have the tendency to not be as healthy as the other foods that are out there. You end up having snack foods that have more sodium or salt contents, things like chips and along those lines. You have snack foods that end up being sugary and sweet or fatty. Now, a totally different subject if your snack table is just filled with vegetables and fruit. That might not be a bad idea, but your typical snack tables are going to have a lot of things that perhaps aren't the best for you to be sitting and noshing at all day. So, another thing to consider is when it comes to your main meal, a lot of times when we think about our holiday meals, they end up being heavier in our meats and carbs, and they end up being a little bit lighter on the side dishes of vegetables, right? And the strategy that I think is important, really not only just for the holidays, but generally speaking, is when we think about anti-inflammatory and when we think about how to get the blood pumping throughout our body and healing from injuries, when we talk about even losing weight or managing our weight at a healthy amount, ultimately the trend, the research is pushing towards more plant-based nutrition. So what I say to a lot of my patients is, instead of, meat and carbs and breads and potatoes and rice and pastas being the main course, and your vegetables being your side entrees or your side dishes, flipping the script. So loading up more on multicolored vegetables, leafy greens, salads, raw, uncooked, or steamed vegetables, loading up on those, and then actually using your meats and your carbs as your side. Doesn't sound as fun, but in doing so ends up being a lot more healthy for you, and especially when it comes to the inflammation that's within your body. So make room for those veggies. Fruits are great too. The fruits that you should gravitate to, if possible, are things like berries. Berries, especially things like blueberries, super high antioxidant levels, really, really nutritious, and can satiate that sweet tooth. Instead of picking up some M&Ms, picking up some blueberries could make miles of difference when it comes to inflammation, when it comes to pain, and when it comes to preventing us from gaining too much weight. So in the don't categories are your M&Ms, your simple sugars, your carbohydrates, etc. In your do category, you have your veggies. Now, being more towards plant-based does not necessarily mean that you have to stop eating meat. Now, I'm vegetarian. I have family members and friends that are vegan. In theory, there's a lot of research that is showing for cardiovascular health, you want to go towards that direction. But that being said, there are ways to eat meats in a healthy and safe manner. The biggest thing is staying away from processed meats. So the processed meats, the World Health Organization has stated a few years ago now at this point that processed meats have fall into kind of the same category as cigarette smoke, as having the potential of causing or propagating cancer. So processed red meats are something that we want to try to avoid. But grass-fed, organic type products could certainly be beneficial. Having too much fatty meats can really be harmful, over the holidays. Lean meats could be better. What's interesting is that things like eggs are actually a rich source of protein that could be really beneficial for folks. But interestingly, there are some folks that eggs even cause inflammation to be worse. So things like eggs and chicken, if you're the type of person that eats things like eggs and then has some increased gas, or burping, farting, that kind of thing, then it may be something that is an inflammatory food for you. That being said, there's some folks that have inflammatory reaction to certain vegetables. So even things like broccoli or your nightshade vegetables can sometimes cause some increased inflammation in people. So that's something that ends up being on a person by person basis. Typically speaking, your fish, seafood products tend to be a little richer in omega-3 fatty acids and more healthy for you. Sticking with what's called a Mediterranean diet may be one of the most beneficial when it comes to anti-inflammatory reaction and staying healthy over the holidays. But of course, you're visiting family, you're visiting friends, you might not be able to choose exactly what you are going to be eating. But what you can do is control your portions. So again, switching up what's your main entree and what's your side. And then, a couple of things to consider if you're trying to shop for the holidays, or if you're trying to shop for your big meal that you're cooking, or if you're trying to shop for things that you're going to be bringing to that holiday party. And this is a hint that we all kind of know in our heart of hearts, is that you shouldn't be going to the grocery store while you're hungry, because that's a situation that you're going to end up buying things that seem like they're going to be tasty and not paying as much attention to your nutritional labels. Reading your nutrition labels ends up being an important part of the grocery shopping experience. And if you're interested in learning more about how to read nutrition labels, then feel free to contact us and we'll be able to give you some resources as to how to do that. So don't shop hungry, right? And then one of the really big things that I'm a fan of, that I think that could be beneficial, is when you're going to holiday get-togethers with friends or family. It's hard if you're really focused on paying attention to your nutrition and trying to prevent, yourself from gaining too much weight or flaring up your pain condition. If you have that mindset, but nobody else there does, then it could be really, really difficult and challenging when you're the only person that's, paying attention to what you're eating. So if you have the capacity to do so, what I try to recommend is finding a buddy. So this could be a brother, sister, parent, family member, son, daughter, whatever. It could be a friend. It could be someone that you divulge that, I have this pain condition, or I'm really trying to focus on my nutrition. I want to pair up, and I want to have some level of accountability. And shoot, if you vocalize yourself, then you might even spark that kind of interest, that kind of motivation in somebody else. And if you partner with somebody, that can make things a lot easier when you're trying to watch yourself. So having a partner ends up really being key. So those are kind of some general hints to think about when you're trying to eat healthy for the holidays. One final thing in terms of the don't category is don't feel bad, right? Don't feel bad. So it's all right if you have that piece of pie. It's all right if you indulge a little bit because your family member made some kind of dish that looks really, really good. It's okay. You don't have to kill yourself over that extra dessert that you had or something along those lines. It's okay if you have that extra drink because you're celebrating the end of the year with your family and friends. But it's just really important to be mindful that you have that extra thing, But if you take care of yourself for the remainder of the time, then it's perfectly fine to indulge. It's just going to be really important to get back on that wagon. So I hope this all made sense. I hope a lot of this stuff is it really is common sense. This stuff makes sense for you, but it's really important to be mindful and think about these things. So try to stay away from your processed sugars, or limit your processed sugars. Stay away from those M&Ms. Decrease your alcohol or change your alcohol up, right? Drinking that red wine instead of white wine. Staying away from the fattier, heavier drinks like eggnog, right? And using water to your advantage before a meal, in between drinks, and then really making sure that you focus on increasing your veggies, switching up that main entree and that side dish so you can be more multicolored, vegetable specific. Partner up with a friend or family member, and stay away from talking in front of the snack table, and when you're preparing for your meals, don't shop hungry. If you like this video, if you enjoyed this, then please share it, like it. If you want to hear any of our past videos, my past Facebook Lives are available on Facebook, but are also available on YouTube and on our website, fxregencenter.com. If you want me to talk about any other topics in the future, or if you have any questions or concerns, then please feel free to contact us. You can DM, you can comment, or you can email us at info@fxregencenter.com. We're going to be talking about a few other things before the year wraps up, and then we're on to 2022. So I hope you all are doing well. If I don't see you before the holidays, then have a very, very happy holidays and a happy new year. I wish you all the best, and I will see you next time.